it's too late when those high streets are gone. So when 2/3 or 3/4 of your high street is boarded up, it's too late then really to do anything about it. This is also up to the public to go into their high streets and to be there and to spend money there, because otherwise, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Following a turbulent year for the British High Street in 2023, a number of big brands have announced plans to close more stores in 2024. Last year saw multiple companies either reducing their properties or ceasing trading altogether. They've joined the growing list of huge names such as Woolworths, Debenhams and Topshop, which have disappeared from our towns and cities in a major blow to shoppers and communities. In 2023, Iceland became the latest high street heavyweight to announce closures, with over a dozen stores shutting down for good. M&S also announced it was closing down some 67 stores. And now it looks like the UK high street is staring down the barrel of more boarded up shop fronts, following figures from the Centre for Retail Research which revealed over 10,000 shops and almost 120,000 retail jobs were lost last year. And it's not just retailers disappearing from the high street either, with thousands of banks shutting up shop in the near future as people lean into online sales and services. So what does the future of our high street look like heading into 2024? And is it all doom and gloom? Here's the latest list of big name brands closing sites as we head into this year. High street pharmacy Boots have announced a string of closures following poor sales in the last few years. Heading into 2024, the beauty and pharmacy chain is closing hundreds of its UK stores, cutting the number of shops from 2,200 to 1,900. It's been confirmed that these Boots stores will shut this year. Fans of a cheap pint will be distraught to hear that Wetherspoons are set to call last orders on a number of pubs across the UK. Even coffee shops aren't immune to an economic downturn, with Costa announcing it's closing the following stores in 2024. Other big names affected by closures are Clinton Cards, which has revealed some 38 branches could be at risk, and last but by no means least is Argos, which announced it would close some 300 stores in 2023 and 2024. Although it's not all doom and gloom, as the brand looks to move its presence into supermarket sites, following the company's acquisition by Sainsbury's. And with Wilko sites being snapped up by rival competitors following news of its liquidation last year, is there still life in the high street yet?
So I think we've seen a number of things that have caused the start of the demise of the high street. The recovery from COVID. We've also seen, of course, high rents and the fact that rents remain very, very high despite the fact that footfall is lower, high interest rates, uncertainty around the economy, and simply the fact that online retail now, it's so easy and cost effective simply to sit at your desk and click your mouse around the Amazon website. That really has hurt the high street, simply. It's a sad state of affairs that high streets over the last 20 or 30 years have changed from a place where you can go to buy everything to now essentially places that are full of hairdressers, estate agents and coffee shops. Out of town shopping centres, online shopping and so on has really changed the dynamic of the high street. And we kind of lament that, we kind of ask ourselves why that is, and we talk about what a shame that is. But again, I go back to the point that, there are effectively, I guess, two reasons why this is happening and why high streets are seeing more and more empty spaces, more and more shops closing. And those reasons really are that, as I've said, really people are kind of encouraged not to go into them rather than to kind of go convenient shopping elsewhere. So it is a footfall issue. But the other issue, of course, is that of landlords. The majority of these high street premises are owned by either independent landlords or indeed pension companies, so large property institutions that own them on the basis of getting a return, and often for pension and investment companies. It doesn't seem that those companies have really kept pace in terms of that decline in demand and footfall in our high streets versus the rent that they charge. So the reason that we're seeing the likes of Boots and others, and indeed particularly small independents, shutting down in the high street is because there's a huge disconnect now, a real gap between what is justified in terms of paying rent by that shopkeeper on a month-to-month, year-to-year basis, and indeed what they do charge. So there's this huge difference between what should be charged and inarguably a reduction now in the amount of money that landlords are charging those shopkeepers, simply because high streets are not as busy and not as popular anymore. If we're not careful, if the trend continues, which is effectively the decline, the demise of British high streets, we'll end up with not only, I mean, the indignity of high streets with lots and lots and lots of empty shops, and that's actually really, really bad in terms of aesthetic for the community, for crime. Empty shops tend to attract more crime, and it certainly won't help people's local economy or indeed their house prices, I guess, if the high street is looking very, very shabby. And the problem is as well that if we end up in a position where the solution by government, as has been tabled many times, is simply to allow the conversion of shop premises into residential, which could sound like a good idea, I suppose, insofar as creating more homes. That's obviously a good thing. But if for every home that's created at the expense of a shop unit, by way of what the likes of Michael Gove are suggesting, that effectively means that for every home provided, you will lose a newsagent, a hairdressers, a shoe shop, a sweet shop, whatever it might be. And I think that would be a crying shame. And it's too late when those high streets are gone. So when 2/3 or 3/4 of your high street is boarded up, it's too late then really to do anything about it. The time to try and tackle this, to make sure that we have thriving high streets, therefore thriving local economies, house prices, communities, dare I venture that, people getting together on a Saturday and a Sunday in their high street to shop and to drink coffee and to eat breakfast and have lunch and so on. That's a good thing. Forget the commercial reality, but that's a good thing from the point of view of society, surely. So let's not wait till it's too late. Let's do something about it now. So I think there are some causes for positivity. I mean, although we've seen some large retailers close premises, and indeed some, have closed down altogether, the likes of Wilko, for instance, but a lot of those premises are being snapped up by other businesses. We've seen, for instance, also a consolidation where post offices have closed. Those post offices have ended up in WH Smith stores, for instance. And I think we'll also see where banks are closing in great number in high streets. We'll start to see banks popping up as kind of concessions within other businesses potentially. And I certainly hope that happens. Otherwise, local banking is dead. So I do think that the demise of the high street could be overblown, I guess, in terms of the fact that it's not always the case when something closes that it disappears altogether. It might just be a consolidation. Argos and Sainsbury's, I think, is a great example. Yes, Argos closed a load of stores, but they did reinvigorate that business, that brand, by installing them within local Sainsbury's stores. I think we'll see much more of that kind of that cost management by way of consolidation in the future. So it's not that we're going to lose some of these businesses entirely. It's just that they might look and feel a little bit different. The other thing, of course, is that 2023 was pretty uncertain. There was a lot of media hype and speculation around the economy, and indeed some would argue that politicians didn't exactly cover themselves in glory when it comes to how the country and indeed the economy has been handled. But I do think that 2024 is going to see grounds for more optimism. We've certainly seen now inflation halving. That will have a very positive consequence on interest rates. I think we've now seen UK interest rates peak. Many people are saying that interest rates and therefore the cost of borrowing, whether that be bank loans, mortgages, credit cards, and so on, is going to start to fall. So that's going to help spending power and indeed hopefully help people spend more money. And therefore that will begin to reinvigorate and prop up hard-pressed retailers in our high streets in the coming 12 months. So look, I say this, and I don't want to make this political. I say this as a kind of fairly traditional conservative, but I remember when I was a councillor in Brentwood up until 2015, that the demise of the high street in my town would be, the criticism for such would fall on the feet of councillors. So councillors and the council would be criticised quite vociferously by local residents for the demise of the high street. And that was very frustrating because, of course, generally councils don't own high street shops and premises. So they wouldn't have any control whatsoever over the rents that were being charged, and therefore that gap, that disparity between high rents and what shopkeepers can afford based on footfall. But also, actually, even though councils collect business rates, they actually don't have the ability to charge differing amounts. They're told what to charge by central government. Now, what I'm going to suggest is that councils actually do start investing in high street shops. Now, councils are up against it financially, but at the same time, some of them are quite asset rich, some of them have reserves, some of them have capital money that they actually could deploy to purchase high street shops and premises to set their own rents by way of a subsidised rent to allow the butcher, the greengrocer, the whole fable kind of, candlestick maker type thing to exist in high streets once again by way of charging a subsidised rent. Now, the counter argument, of course, is those other retailers in that high street are going to say, well, that's not fair because, that particular retailer is paying a smaller, lower amount of money because the council happens to own the premises. But look, we've got to start somewhere. And I'm certainly not suggesting that we should nationalise high streets. I'm not suggesting that we should end up in a position where councils are buying all of the shops, all of the premises in the high street. What I'm suggesting is that councils could use public money by way of an investment, so they still get a return by way of some rent, but actually to put in independent shopkeepers, a greengrocer, a fishmongers, a butchers, and so on, to ensure that there's a reason to go into the high street, a reason to travel. The other thing, of course, is that councils have got to start thinking about parking. And what I mean by that particularly is parking charges. If you're charging people £8 to park for 2 or 3 hours, then do not be surprised as a local authority when people decide to shop on Amazon or at a local shopping mall where parking is free instead. So I think councils have a part to play here. They need to be a little bit more entrepreneurial, a bit more innovative, take control perhaps of some of those high street premises. But again, I also go back to landlords being perhaps a bit too greedy when it comes to the rent that they are charging, and indeed the public. This is also up to the public to go into their high streets and to be there and to spend money there, because otherwise, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.